Here we go. Okay, so we're talking about how your role matters in this session, and I want to start here. I want to start by stating the fact that you were hired because your role matters. And not just that, but whoever hired you actually thought that you were the right person, that you were the one who had what it would take to get the job done. They saw your experience and your training. They saw your background and your gifts and your personality and thought that you were the right person for this job. So I want to start from that place. I want to start from that understanding of those two core truths and beliefs and realities, because if we could start from that place, then we start from a place of gratitude and we start from a place of abundance. Not starting from a place of having to prove, or not starting from a place of what your identity is and what this whole role is that you fulfill is all about. We want to start from a place believing that it is true, that your role matters, and believing that you were the right person for the job at the time when you were hired. So that posture, that space of gratitude and abundance can change everything. If we can start from that place of believing that your role matters to God and to the church, and that you are in the right place, that you are there for such a time as this, then we can figure out the other stuff about your role, okay? The rest is just details, and when your identity is in the right place, then everything else flows out well. Can I get a virtual amen to that? So today we want to talk a little bit more about your role, and I want to spend the rest of our time talking about those details that can sometimes actually make or break your job. I've been in some form of youth ministry and spiritual leadership for over 20 years. Believe it or not, that is the truth. And so I've had to do this whole role thing a bunch of different times. The last church that I was at, I was in 5 different roles in 10 years. The church before that, I had 3 or 4 different roles in 7 years. I've hired teams of people to do ministry with me. And as I have done that over the last 2 decades, I have learned quite a bit of the significance and the importance of clarifying your job description. In fact, I have had to write my own job description more often than not. It's not been provided to me as often as I would like. And I've learned a few things along the way. So I want to encourage you guys as we talk through your role and the significance of it. And again, speak belief and hope and a sense of matter into who you are and into the role that you do, because it is significant work that we get to do, my friends, in youth ministry. So here's just want to share a couple things about how your role actually matters and how you can move it from a place where you believe it to be true and the church theoretically believes it to be true to it being worked out in the day-to-day of your life and your ministry. So just a couple of big points here. The first thing that I want to communicate to you all today is that what the job needs is sometimes in tension with what is the best that you can bring. Those are your first little fill outs. What the job needs is sometimes in tension with the best that you can bring. And here's what I mean by this. You might be feeling some tension around what the job requires and how you are wired and gifted and what is the best that you can bring to the job. And if there's a gap that exists between those two things, the tension can feel really strong. And so clarifying what it is that you do and what you uniquely, specifically, individually can bring to the ministry is a significant role of leadership that you need to play. I have made the mistake of hiring in the past where I saw someone and I thought, you know what, they're amazing. They have such great gifts. They have relationships within the church. They have the background and personality. There's somebody that I just want on my team. And I have made the mistake of hiring someone to fulfill a job when in fact the job that I needed to have filled, they couldn't actually do. And so I hired the right person, but for the wrong job. And sometimes that happens, is that when a job is not clarified or when the role is not specified in what it is that you are needing to bring, there can be a tension that feels like you're going to snap and break. And some of you might be in that spot right now. So the first question that I would ask for you to think through is, what are the expectations of this role? because there are expectations, and you feel those expectations, and the result of that feeling is the tension that you are in. And so clarify with leadership, with your boss, with whoever is around you that is holding you responsible and accountable to this role. Ask what the expectations are for this job. In this tension, when there is this tension with what this job needs to be done well, beyond what it is exactly that you need to do within that job, you get to bring kind of the unique flair and the contribution that you do as you complete that job. So there's the basics, there's the expectations that need to be filled, there is the job itself that needs to be done, and on top of that, you get to bring who you are and the beauty and the creativity and the uniqueness of who you are into that job and make that job come to life. I was actually just talking with a youth pastor this last weekend, less than a week ago. And he and I were talking about his job, and he's only 7 months into his role. His first time being a full-time youth worker. He's got a gob of education. He's got relationships historically within that church. But he told me he's experiencing some of this tension right now. And as I talked with Kyle a little bit more and kind of plumbed into like, what is it that is about, he kind of blurted out like, I'm just trying to get through April, and they're trying to get me to figure out what's going to happen in September. And he's like, and I have no idea. And I paused the conversation. I said, well, that is exactly the tension and the problem that you're experiencing right now, is that the job has not been clearly defined for you, what it is that is needing to be done, what the expectations of the church are for you to be filled. And he, in his spontaneous nature and his desire to just hang out with students and be relational, is experiencing the tension of those expectations that are before him and who he is wired to be and the kind of work that he wants to do. So that's my first encouragement, is to clarify what is the job that needs to be done, and then what is the best that you can bring to the job to make that job come to life and for you to be able to bring the beauty of who you are into the ministry that you are leading. The second thing that I would strongly urge you to do is to define the job description. Second thing I would tell you, define the job description. So the first question would be, do you actually have a job description? If you don't have a job description, then you probably need one. You absolutely do need one. So the first question is, do you have one? The second question is, do you know what it says? I've talked with lots of youth workers who have said, yeah, I think that there is a job description. I kind of saw that when I got hired, but I have no idea where it's at, and I have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing actually, or why there might be some of this tension that's existing within the ministry right now. And so my encouragement would be, if you've got one, make sure that you know what it is and what it says. And then you could start to look at that job description and go, is this job description actually saying what it is that I need to do and what I am doing? Because again, if there's tension, if there's a gap, that's probably a significant highlighter and like red light flashing as to what it is that actually needs to get defined within your job description. But if you don't have one, if you don't have a job description, then write one. You might need to actually write one. I have had to do that a number of times for myself, because the reality is that no one knows your job better than you do. And so if you do not have a job description that has been written for you, write one yourself that best describes what it is that you do week in, week out, on an annual basis, what it is that is required of you as the youth worker in your church. But don't just write it and keep it to yourself. You need to write it and then share it and get it approved by the powers that be. All right? So it's not just enough for you to write a job description and say, okay, it's done. Here it is. Like, this is what it is. The fact is that somebody employs you and somebody pays for your salary. And so you need to get it approved by the right person that is going to say, yes, this is actually what it is that we want for you to do in this role in our church. So if you don't have one, write one, then get it approved. The next thing that I would say is, regardless of if you've got a job description written for yourself or if you've got to write one, ask yourself this question: what are the things that only you can do? What are the things that only you can do? Because the truth is that part of our role as a youth worker, as a leader, as someone responsible for areas of ministry, is that you are to equip and empower the priesthood of all believers to do the work of the ministry. And so if that is your primary role and responsibility, is to equip the priesthood of all believers, all of the saints for doing ministry, then you are responsible for doing some things that other people are not. And there's some things that only you are capable and qualified and required to do as the shepherd of God's flock for your ministry to thrive. So make sure those things that only you can do are included in your job description. I know that as I worked with my staff, one of the things that I would consistently ask of them is, are you doing the things that only you can do? Because we would find ourselves wrapped up in like the tyranny of the urgent and all of the other things that need to get done. We get wrapped up in like little details of things that others could be responsible to take care of. We could get caught up in the craziness of email and social media, and we would lose sight of the things that only we could do that are necessary to advance the ministry. And so sometimes we just needed to pull ourselves back and go, am I doing the things that only I can do? And if not, let's delegate out. Let's make other people responsible. Let's hand off ministry. Let's empower the priesthood of all believers to do that work as well, so that you can get about doing the things that only you can do. So that kind of sets the tenor for defining the job description. Writing it for yourself if you need one, defining the things that only you can do. But if you're going to write one, or if you're going to renegotiate your own job description, there are a few specific steps that I would strongly encourage you to take to define your role. And the first one is this. Describe your job in 4 to 5 sentences. So what is it, kind of in a big picture scope, that your job entails? Like, your job is different from a children's person or from the primary leader. It's different from your boss. And so what is it that your job is kind of overall responsible to accomplish? So here's an example. I stole this from another church that was hiring a youth person. And they said, kind of in this bigger picture, that this student ministry's job, the primary responsibility of the student ministries director, is to oversee junior high through college age ministries, while providing direct leadership for the high school ministry. This position serves as a spiritual leader and a role model, and it is responsible to develop and implement a comprehensive plan for youth ministry. This plan includes collaborating with the overall church so that student ministries aligns with the whole church's mission. They will recruit and lead adult volunteers and work to build bridges with families in the church and work to equip and serve all students. So that may be a few more than 4 or 5 sentences. I didn't actually count, but that's a great descriptor of what, as they're looking to fill this role and to say that this role matters, this is what the big picture of the job looks like. It sets the tone, it sets the vision for what it is that this person is to accomplish. So that would be the first thing that I would encourage you to do, is describe what it is that this job actually looks like in a big picture, 4 to 5 sentences. The next thing in your job description that you should do is bullet point 5 to 7 responsibilities of what is required to do that job well. So we all know in youth ministry, like, you wear a lot of hats throughout the week or throughout the year. And you could be everything from a game coordinator to a retreat planner to a teacher to a disciplinarian to a counselor to a counselor to parents. Like, there's all kinds of different roles and responsibilities that your role could have. But the truth is that you can't be all of those things, and you cannot do all of those things. So you need to specify 5 to 7 responsibilities that are required, that are so necessary for you to do your job well. So I'll throw out a couple of examples. These could be a part of your job description, but perhaps not, but a couple of ideas for you. One is create a scope and a sequence for 6th through 12th grade teaching and spiritual formation. That could be one of your bullet points in defining what your job actually looks like. Another bullet point could be recruit and train volunteers to invest in students' spiritual and whole lives. So define what it is that your job is required to do. What are those responsibilities? You might need to include a responsibility for a role that is broader than youth ministry, that's for your church as a whole. But consider what those 5 to 7 responsibilities are and capture those to reflect the bigger picture of what your role accomplishes. And then here's the next step. And I think this is really critical because it's easy to create a job description and then let it sit in a file, right? Or let it collect dust or be a saved document somewhere in the computer archives. But what needs to happen once you actually define the job and then create the responsibilities around the job is you need to create and evaluate achievable metrics annually. Let me say that again. You're going to create and evaluate achievable metrics annually. This is really the final part of defining your job description. It's specifying what it looks like for you to do your job well in the next 12 months. So your responsibilities from year to year are probably not going to change unless they add more responsibility to your plate or your church goes through some changes. You probably are not going to change your responsibilities from year to year, but taking your ministry to the next level will certainly change from year to year. So for example, if you're responsible to recruit and train volunteers, which I think every youth worker needs to do if you're going to equip the priesthood of all believers, then year 1 of your job, your metrics might be to create volunteer roles for volunteers to serve in, similar to what we're doing right now, right? Is you help your volunteers understand that their role matters, that what they are doing is significant, and you've clarified for them what it's going to take for them to do their job well. So year 1, you might need to say, I'm going to create what these roles, these opportunities are for my volunteers to serve in. And I'm going to recruit 3 leaders this year for me to join me in ministry. But year 2, you go back to your responsibilities and you go, you know what, we did that. We accomplished defining these roles and we gathered 3 more volunteers to serve us in youth ministry. So year 2, we're going to take that from 3 volunteers to 6 volunteers. And we're not only going to recruit volunteers, but we're going to train those volunteers so that they can be the best that they can be. So we're going to do 3 different trainings in the next year so that our leaders are more equipped to serve teenagers well. When you have metrics, friends, it becomes far more objective for you, your boss, parents, the powers that be around you, to say and to state whether or not you're succeeding and thriving in your role. One of my old bosses actually used to say that he thought it was just mean to not give your employees an annual evaluation. Because he said, because everyone wants to know, am I doing well? Am I doing my job well? Am I doing meaningful work? Am I being effective in the work that I am doing? Because really, we give the best hours of our week to our jobs. And so we need to know, are we doing our jobs well? Are we accomplishing what we have been hired for? Are we advancing the kingdom in ways that are significant and that are in alignment with the rest of the church and that are helping students to connect with God? So this evaluation thing is not anything to be afraid of. It's actually something to be celebrated and something that is so necessary for you to wrap your arms around the truth that your role matters. When you define your job description in these steps, ultimately, I think you're creating this framework for what you're doing so that you don't have to defend. You don't have to overwork. You don't have to prove yourself to the people that are around you. Your job description and defining what it is that you do sets this framework so that what you are doing is the right work and you don't have to do it all. You are not capable of doing it all. And so defining what it is that you do in your work will give you the freedom and the space that is so necessary for you to stay over the long haul. As you're setting this job description, really you're setting boundaries, right? You're setting expectations around what you do and what you don't do. And so this very effort, this very work of creating a job description allows for you to set boundaries of what you're allowing in and what you're allowing out, what you are giving and what you are receiving in ways that will allow your youth ministry to thrive. I love how Seth Godin talks about expectations because this job description thing and defining your role is really all about your expectations. And he says this, it's on your paper. It says this: expectations that don't match what's possible are merely false dreams, and expectations that are too small are a waste. We need teachers and leaders and peers who will help us dig deeper and discover what's possible so that we can push to make it likely. Expectations aren't wishes. They're part of a straightforward equation. This work plus that effort plus these bridges lead to a likelihood of that outcome. It is a clear, wide-eyed awareness of what's possible combined with a community that shares your vision. So my friends, your role matters because you matter and your students matter. And as you define your job description, do it in a way that creates an awareness of what is possible for your community. When your job description is a shared story of a future hope, it creates this vision and it becomes more than a document. It becomes a guide to you and your people that values this incredible work that you do. So do the work. Spend some time going through these action steps, and you will find a greater definition around a work that matters because you matter and because the kingdom matters. Thanks so much for all that you do. You are loved.